Oh, okay, there we go. I wasn't quite sure if I was recording or not, and since I'm kind of a one production crew here, this is how it all works. I'm Greg Penglis, and I am the one that has created and will be hosting again very soon Action Radio. We're coming back with an Action Radio show online. Action Radio is the show, it's the only show in the world actually of its kind, because our audience actually becomes a citizen legislature. We write bills on the air, we submit them to various legislators from local to federal, and we've had some action, which I will be happy to tell you about at great length at another time. But I want to talk about this here. This is my audition tape for a Prager University video, which I would like to do, and it's based on an article I wrote a while back called A Constitutional Budget. Now, if you look here to the right, I have my little my teleprompter sort of here, but this is what I figure we'll do when we get to the Prager University video is we'll have nice little graphics around me, and we'll be able to highlight these kind of things. But this is basically the layout, the way I want to have it done. And so a constitutional budget comes from Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which are the actual things that the government should be funding, and pretty much the only things that the Constitution authorizes the legislature, the Congress, to fund. So I thought it'd be curious, because apparently this has never been done before, is to find out what a constitutional budget would actually cost compared to the budget that Congress passes now, with the huge deficit adding to the national debt and all the various other things that are in the budget that go beyond the Constitution. So I was really curious to find this out. So I wrote an article on this back in, I think it was May, I can look up the date, May of 2017. If you go to Canada Free Press or the Intellectual Conservative, both of those sites have published this work, A Constitutional Budget, or you can look it up online as well. So just go to Greg Penglis, that's P-E-N-G-L-I-S, and look up my article, A Constitutional Budget, and you will find that apparently this is, even the Congress doesn't do this. This is the only one of its kind. So if we make a short video, 5-minute video, just based on this article, this is kind of how it would go. I would introduce myself very briefly as the Action Radio host, and the citizen legislature, do that just very fast, and then go to the actual article. So what is a constitutional budget? Constitutional budget is what the government would spend to fund only those things that were authorized by Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Article 1 covers the legislature, the Congress. All right, so there's a series of clauses in Article 1, Section 8, and I took each clause and I tried to find, to the best of my ability, the government agencies that this clause would call for, and then to find out the most accurate budget numbers I could. And that proved to be a real challenge, because there's no one source of budget information for the federal government, hence a lot of the problems that they have. Okay, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The first duty of Congress, the Congress, you can see it right from here, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and exercises shall be uniform throughout the United States. I guess what was happening was the different states were taxing things at a different rate, and so everything was getting all messed up. Anyway, let's take a look. So clause, how would you fund that? Well, who has the power to lay and collect taxes in the government? That would be the IRS. And so I looked at the IRS budget. So to collect taxes, imposts, it's not a word we use very often these days, and excises, I took the IRS budget. It was $11.5 billion, you can see right here, $11.5 billion in fiscal year, that's FY 2017, and that came directly from the IRS.gov website. And so we go back up here, we can see we've got collect taxes, duties. Duties are what used to be paid on goods that were imported or things that people brought into the country, and it used to fund the entire government. Now it funds about 1% of the government, and that's what Customs used to do before it became Customs and Border Protection. It was U.S. Customs. It was part of the Treasury Department. Its duty was to basically fund the government. All right, so collecting duties is still Clause 1. All right, so go back up here, just to keep you all in check of what's going on. Clause 1 is the power of Congress to lay and collect taxes. All right. So collecting duties on imports funds about 1% of the federal budget, as I said. This cost has been included in the Customs and Border Protection budget from the Department of Homeland Security in the defense clauses below. So we'll see that a little bit later. So we're looking at Clause 1, costs $11.5 billion for the IRS. All right. The common defense is provided for in the defense items. You'll see them below. Also, general welfare. This is from the preamble. Talk about general welfare. It doesn't mean welfare. It doesn't mean government benefits. It doesn't mean entitlements. It doesn't mean Social Security. It doesn't mean Medicare. It doesn't mean any of those things. What providing for the general welfare means passing laws that are good for everyone generally and not specific to any group or individual. So laws that are passed specific to a group or an individual are violating this clause of the Constitution. Clause 2, to borrow money on the credit of the United States. So borrowing money, one of the biggest problems we have is the national debt. So what's the cost of Clause 2? Interest on the national debt based on Treasury notes, bonds, savings bonds, and state and local tax exempt. I think these are possibly municipal bonds. Anyway, any financial. We'll do more research as we get ready for the video. All right. So the cost of all the national debt, the interest on the national debt is $523 billion for fiscal year 2018, and the source of that was treasurydirect.gov. That's Clause 2. Clause 3, to regulate commerce with the foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. All right, so the organizations, the government departments that I found to regulate commerce, the first one, of course, is the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration. That costs $495 million. My source, the House Appropriations Committee, fiscal year 2018. For the Department of Commerce, the part within the, because a lot of the commerce promotes trade. This is the part we're looking at regulating commerce. All right, so the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration regulates international trade. Okay. Trade Enforcement Trust Fund. I have no idea what this is. I got to research some of these things. But the Trade Enforcement Trust Fund, they spend it on trade, and it costs $15 million. All right, and that's the House Appropriations Committee, again, fiscal year 2018. International Trade Commission, ITC, $92.5 million. Again, House Appropriations, fiscal year 2018. The Bureau of Indian Affairs for fiscal year 2019, their request for the Community and Economic Development Office. Remember, we're talking about Indian and regulate commerce among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So to regulate commerce with the Indian tribes, we found the Community and Economic Development Office, that's right here, and the Indian Energy Service Center cost $35.8 million, and that was Bureau of Indian Affairs website. You'll find that. Also, the Interstate Commerce Commission was replaced by the Surface Transportation Board. So the ICC is gone, and so railroad regulation, all the weights, the freight, the fees, the routings, everything that goes on with railroads is now covered by the Surface Transportation Board. And of course, that's all interstate commerce. Cost in fiscal year 2018, $37.1 million. The source is the Surface Transportation Board website. Clause 4. To establish a uniform rule of naturalization, well, that's a challenge these days, and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. Now, I'm not sure why they put naturalization and bankruptcies in the same clause, because they're two totally different things. But let's take a look. So what's under Clause 4 is the Office of United States Citizen and Immigration Services, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, fiscal year 2019 request, $4.7 billion to bring folks into the country. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Mandatory fees from fiscal year 2017 were $4.5 billion. So legal immigrants pay the fees to become legal residents of the United States. Illegal aliens just come in. They don't have to pay anything. But what it means is there was no set number here. So you got a cost of $4.7 billion in fiscal year 2019. You've got fiscal year 2017, the nearest numbers I could find, $4.5 billion were coming in. So they're almost comparable. So they've pretty much canceled themselves out. So the Office of United States Citizen and Immigration Services pays for itself. All right. Bankruptcies are covered in the IRS budget above, which I already talked about, and by the bankruptcy court function, which I put in the judiciary budget, the federal judiciary, which you'll see a little bit further down below. Clause 5. To coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. All right, first one is the U.S. Mint. Is the department under this clause. The Mint makes the coins, all right? So the Mint actually makes money, this is another one that makes money, through the sale of circulating coins to the Federal Reserve banks, bullion coins to dealers, and special coins to the public. Ever see the Federal Reserve has released a special gold coin or a silver coin set? Yeah, that's what this is. All right. And the source of this was the U.S. Treasury website. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing. These are the folks that print the dollar notes. Okay, so you got the coins done by the mint. You've got the dollars, the notes printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. They, of course, lose money, especially with the Obama administration quantitative easing, which was just printing gobs and gobs of money, hoping to somehow improve the economy. But, of course, the more dollars that circulate, the less each dollar is worth. It's like taking a pie. All right, and you have 8 slices in your pie. You think that's great. I want more pie. So then you cut the pie into 16 slices. Each slice is now half as big as it was before. You've got 16 slices, so you think you got more pie, but you don't. You've made each slice worth half of what it was before. That's what happens when you print all the excess money. The more money that's printed, the less each dollar is worth. And if the dollar is worth less, to get the same value, people have to raise prices to match the lower value of the dollars. So these are the folks that actually create inflation. Inflation is not prices rising and you have to spend more money. It's printing more money, which causes prices to rise. Most people have that backwards. All right. But they're still under here, clause 5, coin money, regulate the value thereof, etc., etc. All right. Last one, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. This is expensive, $952 million for 2017. So what do? How much standards information do you need? Well, with all the products coming out, the different measures and the way things are going, and plus the fact they do a lot of industrial trade promotion, regulation of competition from foreign sources. You know, we are on the old English system. Everybody else is on the metric system. So all these things have to be equalized, calculated for every industry and every product and everything. And that's probably why it costs $952 million, unless they're wasting some of it, which they probably are. All right. Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve you might think of as the agency that would regulate the value of money, especially through interest rates that they just raise for no reason. But the Federal Reserve was excluded from my analysis because they aren't federal, they certainly aren't a reserve, and they could never be considered constitutional. All right, Clause 6. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. This is when I think there's only 3 crimes mentioned in the Constitution: bribery, it's piracy, treason, and counterfeiting. That's it. So all the other crimes, all the other FBI stuff that goes on, there's no constitutional provision for an FBI, for a national police force. It just doesn't exist. All right, anyway. So for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, I had the Secret Service. But not all of it. I had to try and find out how much was actually going into counterfeiting and analysis and investigation, all the other things they do. And so what I did was I did find the Protective Services budget. The actual U.S. Secret Service budget is about $2 billion a year. All right, so a lot of that goes to presidential and dignitary protection. About $800 million of that is where that goes. So what's left is $1.2 billion. So let's say the Protective Services have been taken out. We have $1.2 billion left for protecting the currency, the counterfeiting, and everything else that the Secret Service analyzes. See, the problem is this isn't an exact science because the exact language of the Constitution is not used for a budget anymore. So one of the things we should do is actually pass a bill, which I'll do in Action Radio. I've already got a draft of this started for the Congress to publish every year a constitutional budget just like this, but use the Congressional Research Service, use the Library of Congress, use all the resources they have that I don't, to actually print how much a constitutional budget would cost and which agencies are actually constitutional per the clauses that are in here. That in itself would be an interesting exercise. All right. Secret Service, $1.2 billion in fiscal year 2018. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, which Secret Service is under. That's where I found that information. U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. I put them in too, because the clauses provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities, but I wanted to protect the securities in general, so I've included the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, fiscal year 2018 request, $1.6 billion. These are the folks that go after insider trading, all the fraud and anything that might go on in our various markets, commodities, stock market, things like that, Securities and Exchange Commission. Clause 7. This one was kind of interesting. To establish post offices and post roads. So the post office is actually required by the Constitution. Now it's been privatized, but for the life of me, I could not find accurate financial information on the post office. I tried. I really did. I really did. But Anyway, U.S. Postal Service now funds itself as far as I could find, but like I say, there were no numbers available on what it actually did. Now, post roads, I found that interesting. What's a post road? Well, I figured highways, okay? Because the mail has to travel all the, and now we have all the private carriers too, UPS, DHL, FedEx, anybody else that's in the biz. But so I put the interstate highway system and the Federal Highway Administration as part of maintaining the roads that carry the mail. So Federal Highway Administration total aid to highways, post roads for fiscal year 2018 was $43.8 billion, and the source was the Department of Transportation, or DOT.gov. I also put the Federal Aviation Administration in here too, because not only do they do airmail for the government through the post office, still quasi-government. They also do all the air packages, air mail, air shipments, all your Amazon packages you're going to get for Christmas, probably carried by air. A lot of them, unless they were ground shipments, in which they might get there, when they get there, kind of thing. But anyway, point being, this is part of our post-road system that they could not have foreseen. So I put the FAA in with the Federal Aviation Administration in with the Federal Highway Administration. Total cost $16.1 billion in fiscal year 2019. That's the request, again from the DOT, Department of Transportation.gov website. Clause 8. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and investors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. All right, that's basically patents and trademarks. And in fact, Action Radio is in the process of getting a trademark at this time because it's mine. I want to keep it. I want to protect everything that I built. And there's so many things going on with Action Radio. We've got Action Radio podcast page. We've got the new Action Radio group. We've got Action Radio video page. We have an Action Radio YouTube page. We have many things going on with Action Radio. That's going to be very interesting as we come back with our online show. All right. So how do you protect science and the useful arts? By securing limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. You use the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which cost $3.5 billion. My source, the House Appropriations Committee, that was in 2017, $3.5 billion. Now, there's good news in this agency too. It's interesting that the agencies that fund themselves, a lot of them are actually covered by the Constitution, which is kind of cool. All right. Now, this is equal, that $3.5 billion is equal to the fees collected for 2018, and this is according to the Congressional Budget Office. So the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, or the USPTO, pays for itself. All right. Clause 9. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Well, I couldn't find a breakdown of how much the Supreme Court costs versus all the other courts and judges and systems and things like that. So what I did was I just included the federal judiciary in everything. So the federal judiciary receives $7.1 billion for fiscal year 2018, and that came from the American Bar Association website. So the entire federal court system costs $7.1 billion. Clause 10. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Not sure exactly, again, where to put all this, but I put the Coast Guard here, all right, because it seemed to make the most sense. So the Coast Guard budget for 2018, fiscal year 2018, $12.9 billion, and that came from the Congressional Research Service. I've got offenses against the law of nations would be covered by the Department of Defense, listed below. So put the Coast Guard for guarding our border here. I also, let me see, I guess it's coming later. All right, well, I'll save that for a bit. Clause 11. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Now, it doesn't say the cost of waging war. Okay, that's more in the Defense Department. This is the cost of declaring and going through the procedures that go along with war that the Congress would do, and that I have put into the operating expenses of Congress, which I have down below. All right, we've got here Clause 12. Now, it's going to get a little tricky here when we start getting into the military and the militia stuff especially, so I'll see if I can wade through that. Clause 12. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. That still goes on. Military appropriations, 2 years. And I put Clause 13 here as well, to provide and maintain a Navy, and that would of course include now the Air Force and possibly the Space Force that President Trump has proposed. So, what have we got under Clause 12? The Department of Defense fiscal year 2018 budget, $685 billion. And again, my source, the House Appropriations Committee, which is where all revenue bills start. So I figured, and these aren't exact, I don't know what's passed, and it's hard to know, but Again, these are guidelines. This is a rough idea of what a constitutional budget would cost. All right. Also included in here in the Army and Navy and the defense of the country, the Department of Homeland Security for border protection. So Customs and Border Protection for fiscal year 2019, the request for them is $16.6 billion. And you know, of course, they're very busy where the wall should be, and with the caravans coming in and everything else, as well as protecting the airports, the coastline, illegal aliens, ICE, everything else is all included in this $16.6 billion for Homeland Security. Now, I also put in here the State Department. Diplomatic embassies, consulates, things like that. I put in here the fiscal year 2019 budget was $8.7 billion. And that came from the U.S. Naval Institute News, which I thought was rather interesting that they covered the State Department. The State Department has such a confusing computer program that I couldn't download any of their stuff. They require special Adobe readers and all this other stuff, so they're basically hiding their information. So I got it from these guys. All right, non-military intelligence agencies. Okay, now you've heard the mythical, or the mystical 17 intelligence agencies that all said Trump was colluding with Russia. Okay, it's nonsense. All right, we know it's nonsense. It's a witch hunt. But what is interesting is that the way they divide the intelligence agencies into defense and non-defense, the defense ones are covered by the military budget, which I've already talked about. All right, the non-defense the non-military intelligence agencies, CIA, FBI, things like that, they cost $58 billion, and that's their request for fiscal year 2019. Again, the Congressional Research Service. So all these things are included here in what originally was the Army and Navy, but our security includes State Department, embassies, because a lot of spying, stuff goes on in the embassies. It's all part of our defense. And that's why I included the intelligence, the State Department, as well as the basic military in that clause. All right, clause 14. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. And again, that comes out of the operating expense of Congress because they're making rules. They're not waging war, they're making rules. All right, clause 15. Here's where it gets confusing. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Okay. The militia doesn't do that anymore, and there's a lot of confusion, and I have to do some research myself to find out where exactly, the militia ended with the Militia Act of, I think, 1789 or something, and then the National Guard, which came in, which is not militia. Okay, militia is, there's two types. There's a state-controlled militia, which is independent of the federal government. The National Guard can be federalized, so they are connected to the federal government as well. So states who used to have their own militia, and private citizens forming their own militia groups, being necessary for the security of a free state. That's where that comes from. So I put clause 15 and clause 16 together because they really don't apply as much anymore, and I could probably do a video just on these two. Anyway, clause 16, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states, respectively, okay, this is where the states control the militias, the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. That I'm not sure how it works anymore. This is very confusing. All right. So what I wrote was the independent state militias, which according to the Second Amendment are necessary to the security of a free state, not a free federal government, not a free union, but a free state. The states and the people can form non-federal, well-armed and equipped, which is what well-regulated means, citizen militias under the control of officers commissioned by the states. This is not the National Guard, and there is no federal expense to these clauses. And so that's why I didn't put any. Clause 17. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, and that would be the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., not exceeding 10 miles square, as made by session of particular states and by the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States. Now, so that's Washington, D.C. The reason I put 3 stars right here is because it also says to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So what this means, as you read it, is that the federal government must have the permission of the state legislatures to purchase anything within a state outside the District of Columbia, and the only things they can purchase in states are forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. That's it. So the states out west that are 70% federal land, that's not constitutional. And we'll talk another time about how we find a way to give that land back to the states and take it away from the federal government. So basically the borders, forts, magazines, and arsenals. Magazines hold ammo, arsenals hold guns, dockyards. This is all stuff along the coastline. So this is basically border protection and other needful buildings to maintain the defense of the United States, and so and probably the District of Columbia as well. So another interesting thing that's combined in. All right. So how much does it cost to run D.C.? House Appropriations Committee reports out $695.6 million were paid to the District of Columbia government for fiscal year 2018. Military buildings mentioned in that whole little rant that I just went on would be covered by the Department of Defense. Clause 18. We're almost done. Okay, we're getting close. All right. This has to go into a 5-minute video. Not sure how, because I'm going on now. I basically would just have to find a way to read the clauses, give the actual financial cost, and then total it up at the end, and that's all we're going to have time to do. So, but I'm running a little bit longer now just because I want to get everything explained. That's kind of how I do things. All right. Clause 18. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. This is what they call the necessary and proper clause. Wonder where they got that name. Necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. So the other parts of the Constitution for doing stuff would be Article 2, which is the executive, the president, and Article 3, which is the judiciary or the courts. All right, so to make laws that are necessary and proper, I've got House Appropriation Committee, the budget for running Congress. Because Congress is the one who makes all laws, because if you look at Article 1, it says that all legislative power is invested in the Congress. That's it. So the only people who can really make laws are the Congress, and the cost of running Congress, according to the fiscal year 2019 appropriation from the House, is going to be $3.8 billion. All right. So I got my disclaimer here. The numbers are all over the place, and the sources are too. There's no one online line item source for all the federal agencies and departments where I can just look up all the appropriations. There should be one, though. There should be. So I would say do your own comparison. Run your own numbers and see what you come up with. I mean, this is just what I came up with, but there are many ways to do this, and I don't know if I have an exclusive list of all the agencies covered by the clauses, and I might have agencies that I put in that aren't covered by those clauses. I'm not sure. I'm just the first to do this, and we can improve on this. In fact, I talked to Dr. Walter Williams a while back. I was hoping to have his PhD economy candidates do this. Well, apparently they didn't, because I looked online recently, and I'm still the only person that's actually put a dollar value on Article 1, Section 8. All right. So grand total. So what did I come up with? Grand total right here. Drum roll, please. $1.4 trillion. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but it's nowhere near the $4.4 trillion that the federal government spent last year. Actually, what they're estimating for fiscal year 2019. So the constitutional budget, $1.4 trillion. The federal budget estimate for 2019, $4.4 trillion. That's a difference of $3 trillion. Okay. So again, we have a person who was writing for an article source called The Balance. Kimberly Amadeo provided the figures of the federal budget for fiscal year 2019, estimated $4.4 trillion. Constitutional budget, my estimate, $1.4 trillion. I keep repeating those numbers because I really want them to sink in, just to show you how different it is. There it is, $3 trillion difference. Which means, at this time, our federal budget is about 70% unconstitutional. Okay? Most of this is leftist socialist entitlements like Social Security and Medicare and other things, but those so-called those non-discretionary, those things, those mandatory payments, none of them are constitutional. I want you to think about that when your taxes come, or if you look at your withholdings and see how much money is taken out. I figure about 70% again of the federal budget is unconstitutional. Okay, so whenever you hear a report that they need more money, that they have more programs, they need more this, more that, Medicare for everyone, all these things going on, think about that. Think about the federal budget, the national debt, raising the debt ceiling, all these things we want to do. I just want to go over these figures one more time. Constitutional budget, my guess, $1.4 trillion. Federal budget, their estimates, $4.4 trillion. $3 trillion difference. Now, what's interesting is and I'll leave this one last thing with you. With the national debt at about 21 trillion right now, I think. So the federal budget, the national debt's $21 trillion, and we have a $3 trillion surplus of unconstitutional budget spending through 2007. So if they put that $3 trillion every year into national debt reduction, we could have the national debt paid off in 7 years. With that thought, I want to get this to Prager University. If you support this as a Prager University video, please let them know. And it's a constitutional budget. Again, I'm Greg Penglis, the creator and host of Action Radio and the new Action Radio online show, the only show in the world where the audience is the citizen legislature. We do write our own bills. We have expert guests. We have social media. It's completely interactive and a whole lot of fun. And I'll be back on the air very soon. Thank you for watching, and I will get you next time with my next video.